Hi everyone, I'm Diana Goldman and I'm excited to be here cooking with you today. A little bit about me. I am a plant-based chef, I'm a culinary educator. I teach cooking classes for the Sierra Club and I blog on my site, Beantown Kitchen. I recently launched this cookbook, Plants for You, and I'm excited to share a couple recipes from this cookbook with you. I will be cooking today a chocolate mousse, also a miso soup with bok choy and mushrooms. So just a little bit of backstory for the book. I ate a standard Western diet, everything, and I really love to cook and I love to entertain. And about 11 years ago, I watched a documentary called Earthlings, and it depicts the ways in which we use animals for food, for entertainment, and clothing. And when I was through watching it, I was really disturbed by what I had seen, and I felt like I didn't really want to eat animal foods anymore. And I said, well, do we need to eat animal foods to be healthy? Is it necessary? Now, I had studied nutritional science at Cornell as an undergraduate, so I had some nutrition knowledge, and I kind of circled back to that, and I did a little research on my own, and I quickly came to realize that a plant-based diet can be nutritionally adequate and may even be beneficial for the treatment and prevention of disease. So I thought, if we don't need to eat animal products to survive, to be healthy, and I wasn't comfortable with what was happening in the animal industry, I don't think I want to eat them anymore. So I sort of became an insta-vegan on the spot. That was 11 years ago. Luckily, that night for dinner, we were going to a very wonderful restaurant. So I'm based in Boston, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, called Oleana. And I went in and I said, I was looking for something vegan, and the waitress said, we have quite a lot of things on the menu that are vegan, but the chef actually loves to prepare foods with the produce, with the ingredients that she has on hand. Can she create something for you? Now, what would you say in that situation? That was like a definite yes. And out came the most beautiful, abundant, creative, delicious, satisfying samples of food. And I thought, if this is plant-based eating, I'm all in. And then I woke up the next morning and I said, well, what am I going to eat? And I managed to make my way through that day. I had something for breakfast, probably had some oatmeal, and something for lunch, and something for dinner. And at that point, I said, I want to figure this out. I'm going to figure out how to cook something that is as delicious and satisfying and creative and wonderful as I had had at that restaurant. So for the next year, I made a goal for myself that I was going to try a new plant-based recipe every day for a year. I didn't quite get there, but I did get close. I also enrolled in a number of different plant-based culinary programs. And I circled back to Cornell and I got a certificate in plant-based nutrition, really to up my nutrition knowledge. I told you I love to cook and entertain. I was really nervous about feeding other people. Could I have people over and just give them vegan food? Would they feel like they needed to eat before they arrived? Would they not like the food? Would they leave hungry? I took a chance and I did start entertaining. I started sharing the food. I was making things like pizzas and burgers and casseroles and stews and curries and sushi and sandwiches and muffins and cakes and ice cream, like the list goes on and on. And something interesting happened. People did like the food. They loved the food, and they were saying, will you share the recipes with me? And that was the genesis of my blog. And then they said, I really love this food. Can you teach me how to cook? And I said, of course, I would love to do that. And that was the genesis of a cooking business. And then, I love this food. Would you cook for me? And the next step was I started a small catering business. So it was a lot of things organically grew out of this interest in plant-based cooking, and I was really loving it. So I'm just going to stop there. That's a lot of information, and let you know that I'm available in the chat. If you have any questions about anything I just told you or anything that comes up while I'm showing the recipes, please feel free to ask me questions and I'll be here to answer them. So I'm just going to circle back to Cornell. Again, I mentioned I had studied there to get my undergraduate degree. So my senior year, I was taking a class that I was super excited about, a food science lab. So in this class, we were in the laboratory and we were studying the properties of food. And I found it very, very interesting. And my professor was watching my enthusiasm all semester. And she came up to me one day and she said, Diana, you should write a cookbook. And that came so out of the blue for me. I just sort of thought, oh, okay, I'll file that one away for later. And I didn't give it much thought at all until I started hearing from people, I would eat this way all the time if only you'd cook for me. And of course that made me really happy, but I also felt, oh darn it, I can't cook for everybody. And then this, you should write a cookbook, really bubbled up, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna write a cookbook, and it's gonna be the next best thing to cooking for people. I'm gonna write the most user-friendly cookbook I can. How am I gonna do that? I will, for a start, take to my kitchen like it was the food science lab I loved back when I was a senior in college. And I'm really going to approach this with a scientific method, changing one variable at a time as I cook and really making my way to the best recipe I can. Well, I can't just do that based on my taste and my husband's taste. Poor guy who I was chasing around the house saying, is it better this way or this way? I recruited from my Beantown Kitchen community some recipe testers. I thought, maybe I'll send an email out and there might be somebody in the community who knows someone who is a tester and might like to help me out. I had 58 testers, some of them professional testers, some of them professional cooks, and then a whole bunch of very enthusiastic everyday home cooks. And they were amazing. They helped me so much really to perfect the recipes. Each one tested 5 times. Some of the recipes got booted, they don't belong in this cookbook, and then many of them got elevated and that much better. So that was truly wonderful. Another way I was going to make this cookbook super user-friendly was to include photographs that really accurately depict how the recipes will turn out. And also, I think that plant-based cuisine is gorgeous. So I took a number of food photography classes until I felt like I could use the camera and really depict the beauty that I was seeing. So that was really exciting for me. I included some QR codes in the cookbook that link to videos that supplement the recipes and other material in the book. And I also have a Q&A section in the book that answer all the questions I was hearing over the years. So for instance, people would ask, so what's the connection between what we eat and our health? And I could share in the book that eating plant-based foods tend to be high in antioxidants, high in phytonutrients, high in dietary fiber, relatively low in saturated fat, and all of these are the components of a disease risk minimizing diet. What's the connection between the planet and what we eat? Well, one of the single most impactful things we as individuals can do for the health of the planet is eat plant-based dishes. And every day, 3 times a day, we have an opportunity to do something to benefit the planet. So that's the Q&A section. And then finally, I wanted the cookbook to be as inclusive as possible, to be welcoming, not judgmental, not telling anybody what they should do, and someone would enjoy it at the recipes and reading the book, whether they are fully vegan or an omnivore or anywhere in between. One of the more gratifying things I heard from the book came from my brother, who said to me, he's an omnivore, he said, I love your book. And I said, thanks so much. And then he said, you know what's great about it? I said, yeah. He goes, it's not scary. And I thought that was really awesome. I did not want the book to be scary. So I am going to share with you now the 2 recipes that I mentioned before. I'll start with the chocolate mousse. Okay, to get started, in a small saucepan, we want to add some plant-based milk. You can use any plant-based milk that you like. So I'm just going to heat up this plant-based milk until it comes to a boil. So this is coming to a boil here. And I'm going to turn the heat down. And I'm going to pour in the chocolate chips and heat them until they melt. I'll just stir to melt them. And this recipe is super popular. What's particularly wonderful about it, besides the fact that it really tastes delicious, is it's a great dessert to serve if you have people coming over who eat a plant-based diet or like to eat plant-based dishes, or who are lactose intolerant or don't consume dairy for one reason or another. So it's a very, very creamy dessert without there being any dairy in it at all. So this is just melting now. And then once it is melted, I'm going to add some maple syrup. So a tablespoon of maple syrup here. And I will add some vanilla too, so 2 teaspoons of vanilla. So what I basically have now is a really lush, chocolatey ganache, which I'm going to set aside, and then I'm going to show you a secret ingredient that goes into this mousse that perhaps you'll be surprised about. Hey, voila, magic. I love my food processor. I use it all the time. I love all sorts of kitchen gadgets. I would love to know what is your favorite. Let me know in the chat. One thing that I hear often about plant-based cuisine is I love the food, but it just seems like so much work. And for that reason, in the cookbook, I added a plant-based prep simplified section. And as I mentioned before, I included QR codes in the book that link to videos. So in that section, there is one of those QR codes. And not only do I list a number of tips for simplifying the plant-based prep process, but I also share some of my favorite gadgets and tools and appliances for really making the plant-based prep process easy and fun. So this is perhaps the surprising ingredient that goes into this mousse. It's a silken tofu. You can actually purchase silken tofu in one of these brick packs. This is aseptic packaging that you can find in the Asian section of a supermarket on the shelf, or you can actually get it in the refrigerator section of a supermarket. So we're looking for the silken type of tofu. And then I will just give this a whirl in the food processor. And the beauty of the silken tofu is it just processes down to sort of like a custardy type of consistency. And I like to scrape the sides down so that all of the tofu gets nicely processed. Great, simple, easy. Now I've got the chocolate ganache and pour that straight in. Scrape down all of that luscious chocolatey sauce, and then to that I simply add a pinch of salt, because there's nothing like balancing a chocolate flavor with a little bit of salt. I always like to add a little bit of salt to my chocolatey desserts. And now I'm going to give that a spin. Cook tip for you here. Make sure to stop and scrape, because when you're eating, you're basically hiding the tofu, and no one's going to want to see these little white bits floating around in their dessert. So I stop and I give this a little scrape, give it another whirl. And it's really that simple, okay? So this is the chocolate mousse finished. You can serve this chocolate mousse any way that you like. I show in the cookbook the chocolate mousse served in individual size serving glasses, and I like to collect pretty little glasses for serving things like this dessert. I also sometimes serve it in a pretty glass bowl where all of the mousse goes in, and then you can dish it out and give people their individual servings. I'm simply going to pour this into the bowl, scraping out all the mousse. And then here you see how it looks in the bowl. Very pretty. I just love the combination, perhaps you do too, of fruit and chocolate. Like, what do you like? I love chocolate and orange, and I have a recipe in the cookbook for orange chocolate chip muffins. Of course, chocolate and pomegranate, incredible. I have some artisan chocolate cups in the cookbook with pistachio, pomegranate, sea salt, and dates. Oh my gosh, what a great combination. Speaking of dates, so there's some almond joy date bites, like taking a really moist, sweet medjool date, for instance, and slicing it and putting some almond butter in and some coconut flakes and a chocolate chip. Yum. In this case, I am going to top the chocolate mousse with some raspberries. Voila. Okay, now I'm going to sample the chocolate mousse. It's so good. It's sweet, it's chocolatey, it's delicious, it's smooth, it's decadent. People love this. They tell me they make it all the time for company, for themselves, for a treat. Okay, so I want to share something from the book with you now about the nutritional value of this chocolate mousse. I'm very interested in nutrition, as I mentioned, and I got curious to know, how does the nutritional value of this chocolate mousse compare to a standard chocolate mousse? So in order to understand that, I did a comparison, and I'm actually reading from the book now. Let's talk about protein for a minute. It's a myth that we need to consume animal foods for protein. There's plenty of protein in the plant-based world. Let's take this mousse, for instance. The plant-based mousse has 6 grams of protein versus a traditional mousse, a serving size, has 2.4 grams of protein. So more than half the amount of protein. Where's the protein coming from in this plant-based mousse? Well, plant-based foods, all of them contain some form or amount of protein, and tofu happens to be a really great source of protein made from soybeans. How about iron? So when it comes to iron, again, we think we need to eat meat for iron. There's plenty of sources of iron in the plant-based world, and the plant-based mousse has 1 milligram of iron versus the standard mousse has none at all. Again, beans can be an excellent source of iron, as well as leafy greens, and as well as blackstrap molasses and dried fruit, and the list goes on and on. How about cholesterol? So there's 81.5 milligrams of cholesterol in the standard mousse that I looked at, and there is no milligrams of cholesterol in this plant-based mousse. So basically, the only source of cholesterol that we would have in our diet come from animal foods. Plant-based foods don't contain any cholesterol at all, so it's not a surprise that there's no cholesterol in this mousse. How about calcium? Do we need to consume dairy for calcium? Well, this plant-based mousse has 115 milligrams of calcium, traditional mousse 121, pretty much equal. So no dairy at all in this mousse, and it actually provides a nice source of calcium. So 1 serving size of this chocolate mousse, 240 calories. Traditional mousse, same serving size, 359. So that is 50% more calories. Okay, I'm all set to go. I have all of the ingredients prepped for the ginger miso soup with bok choy and mushrooms. So I've got some scallions, I've got bok choy, the greens and the whites are separated and chopped, ginger, soy sauce, some tofu, and miso. So miso paste is made from fermented soybeans. So delicious. I use it in lots of my recipes. It adds a really nice savory depth of flavor to foods. So first thing I do is I mix the miso paste with some water, and then I want to give this a stir. The idea is I'm going to try to dissolve, I will dissolve the miso in the water so that I have a nice, smooth, rather thin paste. So something I want to say about miso is it's very, very rich in umami flavors. So when we talk about plant-based foods, oftentimes people think that they're going to miss something. And I think what they think they're going to miss is umami flavors, which are quite plentiful in a standard Western diet. Umami comes mostly from an amino acid called glutamate, which adds that savory depth of flavor to foods. Umami is loosely translated from Japanese as the essence of deliciousness. So there are plenty of umami sources in the plant-based cuisine arena. So we have fermented foods like miso and tempeh and sauerkraut and yummy, yummy kimchi, toasted nuts and seeds, mushrooms and tomatoes and soy sauce and balsamic vinegar, and the list goes on and on. It's so important that when I develop recipes, I'm always thinking about, for my savory dishes, how can I add that savory depth of flavor, and I really turn to these ingredients. If you look in the cookbook, in my index, there's a under umami, it will send you a page where I talk about umami. And I had mentioned before QR codes. So again, it's so important that I created a video on this topic. So scan the code, watch the video, and you'll learn more about umami flavors. And the next thing I'm going to do is heat up 7 cups of water, which I've got here in a medium-sized pot. Let me talk about ginger for a minute. First of all, thank you to Melissa's for sending me a number of different ingredients that I'm using today, and also this mammoth piece of ginger. My family was so impressed with it. My husband took a picture and sent it around. He said, look at Mom, she's got a really big piece of ginger. This is half the size, because I've been using it, of what I was sent. Love ginger so much. Do any of you love ginger too? If you do, I totally have you covered. I'm going to grab my cookbook and jump to the index, and I shall read to you a number of different dishes that use ginger. So, for instance, I have creamy vegetable curry, ginger, mint, and lemon tea, yum, yum, yum. This ginger miso soup that I'm making now. Ginger, orange, and rosemary tea. Did you know that ginger, orange, and rosemary is a phenomenal combination? Yum. I also have some mushroom, tofu, and cabbage dumplings that have a really nice ginger flavor. The list goes on. Rainbow Thai bowl, red lentil and spinach dal, a Thai lime juice, and if you want to get fancy, you can jazz it up with some rum or vodka or whatever. That's a really nice summer drink. And then I have a zingy fruit smoothie that has ginger. So I really love ginger. And if you do, like I said, I've got you covered with lots of recipes. And I know what to do with this. So I have minced here a tablespoon of peeled and fresh ginger. And that's going to go in here as well. So while this is coming to a boil, I'll talk to you about what's going to go into this soup next. A little bit of soy sauce. Soy sauce is another one of those ingredients that adds a nice umami depth of flavor. So soy sauce will go in. I'll also be adding some bok choy. So I separate the whites from the greens. So the whites, sort of like more of the stemmy part of the bok choy, will go in first because they take longer to cook. And then the greens will go in later because they take less time to cook. So we'll be adding some diced tofu. And finally, some sliced mushrooms. You can use a number of different mushrooms in this recipe. If I can find them, I love to use enoki mushrooms. In this case, I'm using these sliced cremini mushrooms. Shiitake mushroom is wonderful as well. So I want to say a little bit more about bok choy. So it's a cruciferous vegetable. I love using cruciferous vegetables in my dishes because I love the nutritional benefit that it provides. So let me just start by talking about what those nutritional benefits are. So I have a note in my cookbook with the veggie tofu scramble where I actually talk about this. So they are high in antioxidants and phytonutrients and dietary fiber and vitamins and minerals. They also contain a compound called sulforaphane, which may boost our immune system and may be beneficial for reducing our risk for a number of different diseases. Of the vegetables that contain this sulforaphane compound, these cruciferous vegetables are bok choy and cauliflower and collard greens and cabbage and Brussels sprouts and watercress, and the list goes on and on. In my cookbook, you can look in the index under cruciferous, and it actually takes you to a page where I talk about the benefits as well as which vegetables contain them. And I have these vegetables scattered throughout my recipes because I'm always looking for ways to boost the nutritional content of my dish. To a boil, so to this pot, I'm going to add the soy sauce, the stems of the bok choy, mushrooms, which I have sliced. Ooh, it's packed. And then tofu too, diced tofu. I'm going to bring this back up to a boil, give this a stir, and then let it boil just for a few minutes. While we're waiting for that to happen, I would love to know something. Will you let me know in the chat what is your favorite plant-based ingredient to use? I have so many, it's very hard for me to choose. But I would say mushrooms are one that I really turn to very frequently. I love that they have a nice bite. I love that they have a wonderful flavor. I love that they're so umami rich. I love that they're so versatile. Technically, they're not in the plant kingdom, they're in the fungi kingdom. But still, of course, they're part of a plant-based diet. So I would love to hear what you like as well. There we go, Dawn. Don't you love these old-fashioned kitchen timers? I do. The final thing that I'm going to do is add these leafy greens. I will add, I have not forgotten the miso. That miso paste that I made earlier is going in. Why am I adding it now and not earlier? Miso, if it boils for a while, as I have done with this soup, can take on a bitter flavor. So I wanted to avoid that. And then finally, I've got some green onions, which have been chopped, and in they go. So now this is just going to simmer for a minute until everything cooks through and the greens have wilted. Number of optional ways to serve it. In my family, we really love hot sauce. You could put a little bit of sriracha on top if you liked. I also like to serve it with some toasted sesame seeds. And as I mentioned, some green scallions. And it is, let's give it a try. So good. The bok choy still has a little bit of crunch to it. The tofu and the mushrooms give it like a nice hearty chew. It's so packed with flavor, and that ginger comes through and really brightens the dish. So delicious. Highly recommend it. This is my lunch. Okay, so the last thing I want to say is, I told you that I had a lot of hopes for this book, all the things I wanted to do to make it very user-friendly. So when the books arrived and they were in a box and I was going to open up the box, but I was very nervous. It took me about 3 hours before I had the guts to do it because I was afraid I was going to be disappointed and the book wasn't going to sort of live up to all of my hopes. But I was super pleasantly surprised. It really was everything that I had set out to do. And this was back in May of 2024. And I did a pre-launch prior to my official launch, which was September 17th of 2024. And the book has been very, very popular, so much so that we're on the second print run. And there's two things I've been hearing about the book that have really surprised me. One of them is that people are reading the book cover to cover and saying, like, I've never read a cookbook before. And I'd like to think that that's because there is lots of helpful and interesting information in it, and that the recipes look welcoming and the pictures sort of keep people engaged. And anyway, that's very surprising and gratifying. And the other thing is, people were buying the book and then they were coming back for more and saying it makes a fantastic gift. So people were buying it and are buying it for hostess gifts, buying it for people that they know who are vegan, people they know who are very enthusiastic cooks, people who are foodies, people who love to experiment in the kitchen, people who are looking to eat plant-forward dishes. So there's been a lot of people coming back and saying this really works very well as a gift. So again, that's been very, very gratifying for me too. And then finally, I would say I've learned a number of things from this experience of writing the book. So number one is, if you have a heavy heart about something, and as I mentioned, I had a heavy heart and do about the animals and the planet, taking action can be a very soothing remedy. So for me, writing this cookbook has been really, really helpful in that way. And the second thing is the importance of community. So I was so supported by friends and family, and I mentioned the recipe testers, and it gave me accountability to people who said, how is the cookbook coming? Or so excited for the cookbook. So the community really helped carry me along, which was really, really wonderful. And then finally, I had mentioned that this professor at Cornell had said to me, Diana, you should write a cookbook. And I would say that if you see a spark in someone and you have a vision for where that spark might take them, absolutely share it with them. You never know what seed you might plant in them that might help them to realize their dream in the future. And I would just close by saying thank you so much for watching, and thank you for helping me to realize my dream of sharing a message I care so very deeply about.